greenhouse gases. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is Patty Durand. As Melissa said at the beginning of the webinar, I'm working with Dr. Divan and PhD candidate Frank Kregebaum on this issue, on all these issues. So I am a past director of the Sierra Club, the Georgia chapter specifically, for 4 years. And my main focus there was energy policy and climate change programming. So I have a deep background in this area. And prior to that, I have 10 years in information technology. So that's who I am. And I'm just going to speak for 2 or 3 minutes about the point of view of an advocate on these issues, since I'm more probably like the rest of the audience on this webinar than perhaps Dr. Divan is as a technologist. So as we all know, we face a huge threat to climate change as a result of burning fossil fuels. We're all searching for ways to reduce carbon emissions. In terms of the electricity grid, we want power from clean energy like wind and solar, not coal. But wind and solar power are intermittent sources, and intermittency can't be easily integrated into the grid, which is something that I hadn't really thought about as I worked to promote renewable portfolio standards. But the utility grid requires energy to be supplied at a steady state. So technologically, passing RPS, renewable portfolio standards, that requires utilities to integrate wind and solar on the grid, except maybe in small amounts, is no different than carbon capture and sequestration that some people think is happening. The technology is just not there, or if it's there, it's very expensive. So that's where the smart grid comes in. Right now, some of the work that I'm working on here at Tech and that researchers are basically is advancing computing technology to the grid so that the grid can do things never before possible. For instance, charging electric vehicle batteries with renewable energies like Dr. Divan mentioned is something never possible before this time in our world. Also, there are possible home energy management systems that can make everyone have their own personal energy portfolio. And there are other ways, like maybe automating the use of energy into late night hours where we can take some load off of peak demand. So those are some of the ways the grid can help energy be used in ways never before imagined. But as an advocate, I tended not to think too much about the cost involved, and I certainly didn't know too much about intermittency. I just knew what I wanted and hoped people like Dr. Divan and utilities in the background could get us there. But I think now that we actually do need to focus on things like consumer adoption of more expensive sources of electricity and more expensive renewable portfolio standards that would cause. So I think we need to focus on ways to meet these goals affordably, and I think we need to be aware of the complexities of the things that we're asking for, and maybe offer up a plate of solutions or ways to think about this that meets everyone's goal of economic growth, carbon emissions reductions, and expanding renewable energy solutions. So I guess now we'll open it up for questions and answers from Dr. Divan and myself. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Patty. Can everyone hear me? Patty and Susan, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, great. All right, we have our first question comes from David Anyfield. And David, I'm going to unmute you here so that you can ask your question. 1 second. Okay, David, go ahead and ask.
Well, I'll just read my question. Your talk emphasizes technology agnostic solutions using economic logic, but in reality, economics is often trumped by politics, such as, for example, the oil lobby. How do we avoid this and get to an optimal future sooner rather than later?
I think you raise a very good question. It's, I think it's the biggest challenge that we face as a community is the politics of it. What made the task even more difficult was that there was no alternative solution that seemed to A, be viable in the long term, and B, show a path that you could get to that place. I think given the fact that there was no alternative solution, okay, it was even more difficult for people who wanted to institute and support the change to kind of get us there. So in my mind, I mean, you know, the fact that we still need 30% oil and the fact that, you know, we could probably meet a lot of that domestically means that at least the U.S. Constituents are going to be, you know, not completely unhappy. You know, will we get all there immediately? No, I don't think so. But I do think that the first thing that we have to do is paint a picture that is more complete and is able to meet all the requirements of cost, of security, of being able to fill the energy needs, of being able to propel economic growth. If you do all that, I don't think anybody, at least the consumers, are not going to be pushing back against the possibility of not using petroleum and using something else.
And Melissa, I'd like to jump in.
Sure.
This is Susan Glickman. I'm a colleague with Melissa at the Florida Business Network for Clean Energy Economy, and have been working on policy in the policy arena for about 9 years around climate and energy issues. So every day I deal with the politics. So Dr. Divan, I think you hit on something very important, because so much of the advocacy around climate or energy issues with it such a emerging stage, that I think that we've been talking, as Patty described, in general concepts. Now, as the clean energy economy moves forward and the technologies are emerging and innovating and becoming more reliable and more cost competitive, we really do need a vision to sort of present. I think it's important both for politicians and both for the public to understand that there are alternatives. So, for instance, in Florida, where we're dealing with drilling, it's not enough to just be against drilling. You also have to show a vision, because most of us pull into a gas station and fill our car up with gas. So I think that it is a challenge to overcome the clout of sort of the fossil fuel industries, but I think that important missing piece for clean energy advocates has been exactly the kind of distinct, specific vision that you can show people that we have a pathway forward. So I thank you. You have also given me hope as well. And with that, I'll stop.
And I'd like to just add a question here from Michael Smith. His question is, can biofuel pellets be a partial substitute for coal to be burned in coal-fired power plants?
Absolutely. I think you know, biofuels will have a significant impact on carbon emissions from you know, coal plants, and I understand that there is some of that going on already. And I just you know, kind of heard in a discussion with Secretary Chu actually that we are maybe exporting biofuel pellets to Europe or from here to be able to burn them. So I think you know, the answer to that is yes. The concern I have is not with the ability to use biomass, because I think that's very, you know, good and very important. The concern is if people start scaling it. I mean, look at what's happening in Brazil. Okay, we're seeing a lot of deforestation out there, all for the right reason of growing biofuel. That's a wrong compromise and a wrong choice. But how do you control that? You know, if you know, India and Africa and all want to start developing biofuels, how do you tell them not to? And you know, then what happens to the competition between you know, fuel and food for both land and water use? You know, those are the issues that I tend to worry about. To the extent that we can use forest refuse and we can use biomass that is you know, can be grown, you know, it can make a dent, and that's why we think, you know, something like a 20% number for the U.S. is doable on a sustainable basis. And it can really take a lot of different forms and has a very big and a very important role to play in the energy